What's up, gang? Thanks for joining Bang Bang, a show about war movies with an anti-imperialist twist. I'm Van Jackson.
And I'm Lyle.
And we've got two guests today from one of my favorite shows, the Remember Shuffle podcast. Awesome guys whose last names I don't know. Ben and Giordano, welcome to this show. How are you?
Such a great topic you've got today, I've got to say.
The voices.
Really
They count
intense.
as comedians. We're here to talk about The Hunt for Red October, the 1990 Tom Clancy classic that stars Alec Baldwin and Sean Connery in a rogues gallery of famous people. Before we get into that, can you guys pitch everybody on the Remember Shuffle show and then maybe a little background about whatever you're free to share about your background, mysterious comedians?
Yeah, so Remember Shuffle is kind of a nostalgia podcast, but not really. We talk about all sorts of media from the 2000s decade. So some episodes are really light. We've done episodes on The Dark Knight. We've done episodes on The Matrix. We also cover the politics of the time. We've done all three of the presidential elections from the decade. Sometimes it gets more serious and dark. So we did a 6-part series on the Iraq War that you guys came on for. Thanks again. Great episode. Listen to their episode. That's entry number 4 out of 6. So you might as well listen to 1 through 3 on your way. Yeah. And we like to talk not just in this shitty nostalgia way of like, hey man, you remember frickin' the Chris Nolan Batmans? They were sick. But really try and see the lasting impacts of some of the things that happened 20 years ago. Because the more time I spend in this decade, the more I do think it was a pretty pivotal hinge decade for getting us where we are, mostly because of technology and the internet in a lot of ways. It's something we always keep coming back to and beating like a drum. But we do all kinds of stuff, and we got a Patreon now where we're starting to get a little more experimental. So we just recorded recorded a very fun leftist book club episode on the history of the Soviet Union. So
amazing. I'm going to have to.
Yeah, and we're both, our background, we're both from Canada. We're from the same hometown, Windsor, near Detroit. I think that being Canadian, like, we get the American experience exactly how as you get it, but without the ego of it being our own. And so, like, in some ways, it can be fun to talk about everything. Trust me, we've never done a Canadian election episode and probably never will, but we've done at least 6 hours of podcasts on the American elections.
I mean, you guys are very funny, but I actually think you're very serious podcasters as far as like the amount of prep work you put into your shows. And both myself and my wife were both on your show, and we both felt the same way. I was incredibly impressed with the episode we jumped on the Iraq War. I mean, what you gave both you guys, particularly Ben, you gave like one of the best summaries of the war of the Iraq War I've ever heard. So yeah, I like, if you want to like get a good laugh and then also get a good education, I highly recommend Remember Shuffle.
thank you so much.
100%.
I'll just say one more thing for the background is that both of us did spend some time in graduate school, and I will discourage anyone who will talk to me from going to graduate school. I think it is an enormous racket, and it helps universities not hire professors, and they casualize labor and they exploit grad students. And I could go off for hours on all the evils of it, but it did really teach me how to research and how to like do a presentation. So I regret grad school less and less with every passing day, because I think it has made me a better podcaster.
I think the one upside of higher ed, and particularly like humanities PhDs, ending up being a racket in large part just because of defunding, just overall defunding of the humanities, is that you now have all these wandering PhD havers that still want to use what they know and what they've learned and what they're passionate about in some way or another. Then we end up with a million podcasts like ours. And, I mean, I know like individually it feels like we're just drops in the bucket, but I think collectively we are making a difference.
Yeah.
I was reading about Tom Clancy,
Yeah.
and the way that he like approached writing apparently involved like just reading a bunch of manuals for ships and like documentation on ships. And I was like, this guy would definitely have a podcast now for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Good segue.
Yeah.
If you didn't like segue to the movie, would you just never gotten there?
Dude, in some of our episodes, we'll go like 40 minutes before the movie talk starts.
But then we'll have an extra segment called Behind the Scenes.
Yeah.
We include, we don't, it doesn't go to waste.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hunt for Red October, Tom Clancy. There's a bunch of lore and like fun facts about this movie that I'm sure will come up throughout the episode, especially for which one of you guys was like wanting to do this one, Ben?
That's me. I unironically fucking love this movie. And I recognize that it's propaganda for the CIA, it's propaganda for military spending, it's propaganda against the Russians. I recognize it, warts and all. But it has a special place in my heart because I'm a sucker for a submarine movie. I think the submarine is an excellent setting because it's claustrophobic, it's paranoid, it's inherently high tension. The missions are crazy. It all hinges on you not knowing what's out there because aside from the joke about Polish people, there are no windows on submarines. So you are dependent on imperfect technology and you got all these guys crammed in a tube. Any sub movie I'm down, and a lot of them are thoroughly mid, but I've watched a lot of sub movies in my day. I also like it just on an autobiographical note. When I was like 12 or 13, I was like starting to age out of reading YA stuff. And The Hunt for Red October was one of the first like grown up books that I remember picking up. And I had an embarrassingly long Tom Clancy
Wow.
phase.
What?
I read to the point where Jack Ryan, spoiler alert, Jack Ryan becomes president at one point later in the
That's how
series.
I
crazy.
definitely did not get that far. Yeah, that seems really far.
Jesus. Okay. So wait, oh my god. Okay. On the reading the book, I have a question. Was it hundreds of pages of like did it read like an instruction manual? Like was it detail upon detail? I've
Oh, yeah.
heard that it's like how you turn a wrench and like cleaning bullets and shit. I mean like really detailed.
Yeah, this guy, do they call it like a techno thriller? Is that the subgenre? I forget the exact subgenre that they use for Tom Clancy, but he loves specs. I think it's the first time I ever hit the word AWACS. Like he loves acronyms. He loves describing how things work in the military capacity. Yeah, that's a very big part of it. And of course, for the plot, it all hinges on one incredible piece of technology that the Soviets have cracked and we have not.
I always thought maybe he had started with like a naval tactic that he wanted to write a story about, and then he built this world around a plot that hinges on using a naval tactic on a ship that has a special technology.
Yeah, like how J.R.R. Tolkien made the fictional languages first and then wrote the plot around it. I think it's the same kind of idea for Tom Clancy, but with a technical instruction
I
manual.
haven't read enough. I mean, I read like
Rainbow
the one
Six,
with the one with Harrison Ford. The movie, was he in a few?
Clear and Present
Clear
Danger.
and Present Danger.
I think I read that as a kid, and then I watched the movie too. But we did Some of All Fears somewhat recently for this show, and it seems like the plot, the overall structure is very similar, where like there's a conspiracy and all the political leaders on the US and the Russian side for the most part are like clueless about what's really going on, but Jack Ryan knows because Jack Ryan reads books or Jack Ryan pays attention to the actual people he has to study.
Or Jack Ryan has dinner with someone.
Yeah, right.
Trust me is the through line of like everything
Um,
hinges on trust me.
And then it's like, I mean, it's amazing how similar these two are in this case, because if you don't end up listening to Jack Ryan, there's going to be nuclear holocaust. It's listening to Jack Ryan or nuclear holocaust. So I feel, and I'm just curious if, like, I forget what Clear and Present Danger is about. Is that also a similar thing? I feel like
I think it's about drug running or something.
Yep. It's about that's where we first meet the main character of Rainbow Six as like some spec ops guys that get sent into Colombia.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So Jordana, what do you have any kind of, history with this film? Did you watch
do
it
not.
reluctantly? I don't know.
I went on a tour to that submarine they have in Manhattan, like off the coast, obviously, and I did a little tour of that, and I was just like so enamored with the life down there that I was like, I gotta watch whatever the most like well-known submarine movie is. I
That's the-
felt like I was on the sub. I mean, it's a great practical effects movie. Thank God it was made in 1990.
Yeah. So this movie was like, it was obviously like a blockbuster and successful. It was profitable, but it wasn't even like the top 5 grossing movies of the year it came out. And so like in national security state world, it of course looms like incredibly large. Like you'd have to be a fucking tool to not have seen this or read the book or whatever. But having said that, I hadn't actually seen it fully until we were preparing for this episode.
Wow.
So, I had like my
That's
uncle.
un-American, man.
I know.
I'm glad you're no longer in this beloved country of ours. I
Yeah.
don't think you deserve it.
It's like my uncle worked at Blockbuster and we lived with him and my grand. It's a long story. We lived with him and my grandma for a while, but he used to steal movies from Blockbuster. And one of them that he stole was The Hunt for Red October, which I don't know if you guys, maybe this is dating me. At that time, the VHS version of Hunt for Red October was, you know how like a VHS cassette is all black? It was all red.
Mhm.
Nice.
And that had like never been
Oh, yeah.
done before. And it just stood out. And so it was like a collector's item. So my uncle had to have it, and it always stood out on the shelf. And then twice in high school, I tried to watch it, and I couldn't finish it. And I don't know if that's like something about me, which I guess it is because it's a popular movie. But like, I just like something about at least high school version of me had trouble like following the plot, and like I didn't care about the submarine stuff. I don't know, but I watched it this time around, and I'm like, okay, it's a classic. It's like, I don't know if everything holds up or whatever, but I was like, I get why people would be into this.
It is long in defense of your high school era self. It is not a tight 90. It's like 2 hours and change.
It's also a
I was
Cold War era movie about the American military, an 80s Cold War
Yeah,
movie.
the content might be.
I mean, it's interesting because when I saw that movie, I don't think I saw it at the time. I think I saw it like years later, but still like in the late 90s, I guess, maybe early 2000s. And by then it was considered a classic. And I was actually surprised looking back at its reception history that it actually got like somewhat lukewarm reviews, which is shocking to me because the cast is incredible. The writing, the dialogue is amazing, which we can get to. It's just so sharp the whole way through. I mean, and it's like even like the non-A-list actors are like the best B-list actors ever, like Tim Curry, and like guys that like I totally forgotten about, but who like Fred Thompson, who also was a senator for many years.
Yeah.
Like, it just had like
Or
I
like
feel like it had all the dudes from that era, like the dudes rock.
there's a bunch of like character actor that guys
Yeah.
where the guy who plays the captain of the American boat, I don't remember the actor's name, but if you watch the most recent season of White Lotus, he was the old white guy
Scott
that
Glenn.
Walton Goggins
Scott
wants
Glenn.
to kill.
Oh yeah, that's
Yep.
trip. That's
And
trip.
Tupolev is that Swedish father of 2 other Swedish actors.
Yeah, it's Stellar.
Oh yeah, there's a Skarsgård in here.
We just did a whole
Fucking
thing.
Andor, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Hunt for Red October. I will say, like, this is not a popular take, I don't think, but Ben Affleck, I think, is still the best Jack Ryan. And I say that after having just now seen this. Alec Baldwin was
Well,
he did well.
That's the worst. That's the hottest take I think you've said because Alec Baldwin is just like he's so handsome. Like he acknowledges that really funnily in 30 Rock, where he's like, yeah, I don't know, like I burned bright, but not for very long. And I think he's very good. I don't know. He's a fucking movie star. He looks like it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Ben Affleck Jack Ryan probably since it came out when I was 14 years old. Ditto with the Harrison Ford Jack Ryan. I think this is the only, and I never watched the CIA Office Gym Jack Ryan that they put out on Amazon Prime. So Alec Baldwin will be the only. I mean, the character's name is Jack Ryan. We need Irish American excellence to portray this role, and they got Alec goddamn Baldwin.
Yeah, I also just think I mean, my only comparison point right now is Some of All Fears, which we did an episode on, and I just think this is a much better movie. And the again, like the writing across the board, I think is a lot better. And also just like, and we talked about this during Some of All Fears, Van, but like, I like the fact that Jack Ryan is not like a superhero in this movie. Like he's a guy who reads books and he does some impressive things at the end physically, but like what's interesting about the character, and I think this is what was interesting in most of the books with him too, is that he wasn't like a special ops guy. He was a
He's an analyst.
yeah, he's an
I
analyst.
love that about him.
Right. Yeah, and I think like it works so well in this, whereas like in Some of All Fears, like they try to have a both and. Like he's an analyst, but he also can kick the shit out of this guy who's like 4 times bigger than him, and like was just like easily killing other people with like the tip of his finger in previous scenes. So like, yeah, I just think that maybe it's not Baldwin per se that makes him better than Ben Affleck, but just the movie he's in, the whole feel, the whole sensibility of it, I just enjoy a lot more.
That's fair. I'd say the Jack Ryan on paper in Hunt for Red October is probably the best one. And then as an actor, I think I just have a thing for Ben Affleck. No homo.
I will say that neither of them in my mind, particularly Ben Affleck, but even to some degree Alec Baldwin, I don't find either of them like convincingly like PhD having.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. It is
Like
funny that they
Harrison
all like
Ford,
they're in the
maybe.
boardroom when he goes to meet the president, and the other like senior people there are like, you're just an analyst. And it's like, yeah, he also for some reason is like the most capable guy. He jumps into like the Arctic water and is like making quips when he gets out, like
Yeah,
he's extremely
that's
capable.
true. Well, he was a Marine. I mean, they do. That is part of the
Really?
backstory.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing they sort of glorify in the film is like, yeah, this guy might seem like a pencil pusher who's afraid of turbulence, but let's not forget he was a Marine who was in traction for 10 months or something like that and taught himself how to walk again. And like the fact that he was like Naval Academy class of 72 was like it's like, cut this guy some slack. He might not be a pussy after all. Like that was the basically the line they had in the film. I wonder if we should talk about the actual plot. Ben, what the hell is this movie about?
Okay. Top line news story. A Soviet captain wants to defect with the brand new high-tech Soviet submarine, the Red October. The captain is Marco Ramius, played by Sean Connery. They made Sean Connery speak a few lines of Russian in this movie. Now, I don't speak Russian, but I feel like it's not great. I feel like you could hear that iconic Sean Connery accent, speech impediment, whatever it is, on his Russian.
Is he Scottish? Is Sean Connery Scottish?
Famously.
Yeah. You can hear the Scottish accent in his Russian.
And they're having him speak in like 1 or 2 word sentences. He's like, "It's cold out," like the dialogue in that first bit is very much restricted by Sean Connery's ability to speak Russian.
So about half the movie takes place following his like reverse mutiny. If a mutiny is when all the enlisted men rebel against the officers, this is the opposite, where all of the officers have a plot to defect. That involves fleeing the Soviet Navy that's chasing them, eventually faking a nuclear leak of some kind to get all the guys out, and making contact with the Americans so that they can defect. So we spend a bunch of time with him trying to execute that plan. Meanwhile, we have Jack Ryan, the CIA analyst, played by Alec Baldwin. The spies have seen this brand new Caterpillar drive on the Soviet sub. It's like a jet engine for water, is basically all the movie says that this thing is. I remember the novel went into much deeper detail about how exactly the Caterpillar drive would work, but this thing would let the subs move entirely undetected on paper. And so Jack Ryan is the only guy who is convinced that Marco Ramius wants to defect. As the Red October enters the North Atlantic, basically the entire Soviet surface fleet is out there trying to sink it because they believe that their captain has gone rogue with their sub. Again, part of his plan, because like Cortez burning the boats, he sent a letter to Soviet high command saying that he was going to launch his missiles at New York, starting a nuclear war. He doesn't want to, but he wants to make sure that his men's resolve doesn't break. So the Americans have to disperse their fleet to monitor the Soviets because they don't know what's going on. And eventually, both sides are looking for the Red October to sink it. And Jack Ryan bounces around the North Atlantic. He spends some time on an aircraft carrier, he spends some time on an American sub. And it's kind of a big game of cat and mouse throughout the middle of the film, trying to help this guy defect, basically. And the climax of the film is that he does. They successfully pull off a ruse. There's some action on the sub because it turns out there was a secret KGB agent on board the entire time. There's some shooting. There are things that don't react too well to bullets in this room, as Sean Connery says, but they pull off the whole thing. Like, everybody wins except for one red shirt played by Sam Neill. He gets got, but the crew escape, and they don't even know that their officers have defected. You know, it's Tim Curry, right?
Yeah, the doctor.
Yeah. Tim Curry says, like, you'll get the order of Lenin for this, comrade. Like, watching this, I was shocked at the extent to which almost everyone wins except for the Soviet government. Like, the Soviet sailors, they get a dub, you know? They get like a heroic myth to go out on. The Americans, they get the high tech. Marco Ramius, he gets to defect. No nuclear holocaust. And the film ends with them taking this high-tech sub, pulling it into a river somewhere in New England, and Jack Ryan and Marco Ramius bond over their shared love of fishing and the sea. Because even though they are from two different worlds, they are both men of the sea.
It actually ends in mid-coast Maine, near where me and my wife Colette like to go every other summer.
Nice.
It's a beautiful spot. Highly recommend it. And I had forgotten that that's where the movie ended. I thought another really good thing about the writing actually is that you're not entirely sure. Like, in the beginning, you have no idea what Sean Connery, Ramius's intent actually is. I mean, they're really making him out to be a bad guy in the beginning. He kills basically the
political officer.
Yeah, the political officer that kind of tasked with shadowing him to make sure.
I thought that was an interesting detail to see that like, it's a Soviet ship, so there's a political officer on board. Only one, but
it reminds me of another movie we did. Was it Van? Was it Cross of Iron? But basically, like, the Nazis did the same thing where they had like a Nazi sign to every conventional German unit for the same reasons. They wanted to make sure that they're staying loyal, not just to the German government, but to Hitler.
Can we put Pete Buttigieg on a submarine somewhere? You know, have him be just monitor it.
But so in the beginning, you're not sure what Ramius's intent is, and I even think, like, throughout, I think it's kind of hard for us to realize this because we know the ending already. But I think you're meant, like, the first time you see it, you're kind of not sure, even toward the end, if there's going to be another twist, and it's going to turn out that Ramius is a madman or is loyal to the Russians in some way, or it keeps on going back and forth.
There's a great little red herring where after he kills the political officer, breaks his neck, pretends he slipped on tea, he calls in the chef to be like, you're my witness. I'm getting his missile launching key and I'm going to hang on to it. And the ship's doctor has to be like, sir, the whole reason for 2 keys is that one man can't launch the missiles. And those keys never come up again in the plot. But I think you're exactly right that it's there for the viewer to be like, oh shit, is this guy actually a bad man? Is Jack Ryan wrong? He just had dinner with him one time.
No, it was totally like a Chekhov's gun fake out.
And I honestly like Tim Curry's character is really interesting throughout. He plays the doctor who has to basically confirm, the cause of death for the GRE. Was it a GRU agent or something? But the party shadow guy for Ramius, and he reappears throughout the movie, and he's always second guessing Ramius. He's always like, "Wait, this is crazy. What is going on here? What's going on here?" And like, so I think like the way they use Curry's figure in particular is to kind of like he's kind of a an avatar for the viewer, like almost like,
Mhm.
this is weird. This is weird. Maybe we don't know everything that we're being told, and then it's funny because it does end with Tim Curry basically where he started, where he's still clueless. Like he's like the clueless guy
Yep.
throughout, from beginning to middle to end.
He's the highest ranking guy kept out of the
Yes.
conspiracy. And I'll add one more thing on the writing that I love. I love how they handle foreign language, like the switch from Russian
Mhm.
to English, right?
Yes.
They don't try and do the suspension of disbelief. Like a movie like Enemy at the Gates just gives all the Germans American accents and all the Soviets British accents, and that's as like much as they do. This film had them speak Russian, and the political officer is reading scripture from Ramius's dead wife. So he reads a little bit of like Bhagavad Gita. He reads a bit from the Book of Revelation about the end of the world, and the switch from Russian to English is on the word Armageddon because it's the same in both languages. I'm like, that is a nice
It's
fucking
even
touch.
better than that because Ramius, who by the way is called the schoolmaster of Vilnius because he's considered like learned, well read, he actually quotes when there's the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, God, I can never pronounce. Sorry, this is embarrassing, but you know what I mean. The word that you just used earlier,
Yeah.
the Sanskrit text. He quotes it and he says that this is a quote that kind of Oppenheimer popularized, the founder of the atomic bomb, which I also thought was like really good writing because again, this is a weapons of mass destruction movie. I mean, you're afraid throughout that like the
Mhm.
nukes are going to go off. So it is great that it's around that time. They're not just talking about Armageddon. They're more specific than that. They're talking about Oppenheimer. They're talking about the origins of the Cold
Yeah.
War, and
Mhm.
that's where it eases into the English. I thought that was so well done. I'm glad you said that because I was planning on saying that later. But yeah, that was excellent, and I feel like that's how you should do it in movies
Mhm.
like this. I think.
Have you ever seen that technique before? Like, I don't think I've seen anybody else do that. You do the language switch by like, basically zooming in on a word and then you flip it and then suddenly you went from one to the other. Like, it should be in film schools or like this should be some kind of standard practice.
I should say
Yeah.
that I prefer subtitles, but like for a blockbuster where Americans
Mhm.
don't like subtitles, this is like the best option.
Yeah, I need to hear Sean
Even in
Connery's
that
voice.
scene
Like, that's
where
what I'm here for, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Even in that scene where they finally make contact when they go down in the rescue sub and the Americans and the Russians meet each other, they make Alec Baldwin speak some Russian. And I was watching it pretty closely for the language angle. None of the Americans speak directly to any of the Russians in that scene. The Russians only speak to Alec Baldwin's Jack Ryan because he's the only guy who knows some
Yeah.
Russian. It like raises the stakes of the tension on that scene because the Americans come in with guns because they're still not so sure. And at a certain point, the captain, as the Russians are speaking to one another in English in this scene, the American captain turns to Ryan and goes, "Ryan, what are they
Yeah.
saying?" Because like we're just supposed to kind of understand that. Oh yeah, we switched over, even though they're not actually speaking
Right.
Russian.
The movie, even though I hadn't watched it prior to getting ready for this, the movie looms large in like security studies and international relations as a field because so much of our theorizing is about like signaling and divining the intentions of the other side and worst case
Mm.
assumptions, and like you build all these sort of knowledge widgets around trying to make sense of the world and stuff around claims or assumptions about, I mean, fog of war type shit with when it comes to signaling. And like that is what this whole movie sort of illustrates over and over, not just at the
Absolutely.
meta
Yeah.
level, but even at that level where they're in the same submarine together facing each other like you're saying, and they're not talking to each other except through Jack Ryan, who's got broke ass Russian skills or whatever, like so much room for shit to go
Mhm.
wrong.
And the submarine is a setting where people are so separated, and like you can have a situation where like your villain and hero are squaring off without ever making any contact with each other. And I could see some moments where I'm like, oh, I could see why this was adapted from a book, because there's a few scenes where like Alec Baldwin is sort of doing like game theory in his mind and like imagining, what are you doing? You know,
Yeah.
what are you thinking? But he's doing it like aloud while like shaving or showering. He has to, and I was like, oh, in a book, this would be
Mhm.
him thinking, but you
Yeah.
know.
I was like, why is he saying this out loud?
But yeah, the whole time he's trying to get into his mind, and I would have loved to have seen the scene where he went to dinner with the admiral or Sean Connery's character. But otherwise, yeah, I love that ability for the movie to focus on this separation of the hero and villain, and them just wondering, what is he doing? Like, what are his options? What are his motivations?
Yeah, because Jack Ryan basically works it out on a hunch. The conclusive list of
We need to
evidence
talk
that he
about
has
this.
that
Yeah.
Ramius is about. Sorry, I know I kind of
No, it's
jumped in
good.
and
No,
interrupted you.
this is
Did
what
you,
I
do
was.
you have
This is
something
what
else
I
to
was
say
going to
on
bring
that?
up.
But
Yeah.
no, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. He has a hunch because number one, first piece of evidence, the day Marco Ramius defects or goes off course, abandons his orders, is the anniversary of his wife's death.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. He sees the picture. He's
Um,
like, "Oh,
he met
what the
him.
fuck?" He like in the middle of a meeting. He like he's like, "You
Yeah.
dirty dog,
You
you."
son of a bitch, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anniversary of dead wife. He is not an ethnic Russian. He's a Latvian or an Estonian or a Lithuanian. Don't yell at me, Baltic people.
He's Lithuanian.
Um, I think
Yeah.
Lithuania, right? Vilnius, yeah. So, and I think that's basically the end of the evidence to support his hunch. Oh yeah, and he met him once at a dinner. They just, got a good gut feeling that this guy wasn't
He doesn't
totally
have
down
any.
for the
Yeah, he
Soviet
doesn't have any
project or
connection.
whatever.
He doesn't have any family left in Russia. He doesn't have anyone to.
Yeah, could I ask you guys actually, because I wanted to ask you. So he has like a moral objection because the nature of this attack submarine is only one which could like institute a nuclear attack, and this is sort of like a groundbreaking in, I guess, its central purpose. And I had to sort of just accept that as fact. But I feel like a lot of the weapons we make are pretty like aggressive in nature.
The whole first strike weapon. That was the question that
Yeah,
like the National Security Advisor
that's the
asked.
moral
That was
objection.
Yeah,
bullshit. That was
Van,
bullshit.
Van can speak to this more, specifically, but the U.S. is notorious for being one of the only great powers left that refuses to renounce first strike capabilities. So, like, it's actually the reverse.
Cool.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if the Soviets. I don't know if the Soviets at any point. Van, did they renounce? Did they ever like take steps to renounce first strike? I think they did.
It's the same with the Chinese now. Like they have a declaratory policy that says they won't use nuclear weapons first. And then we say that's not credible. And then because it's not credible, we reserve the right to go first.
Yeah.
So we refuse to make the rhetorical gesture that you make
Mm.
because we think your rhetorical gesture is not honest. And therefore, therefore, if we made that rhetorical gesture and said we won't use nuclear weapons first, we know you wouldn't believe us anyway. So
Signed, the only people to ever
Mm.
use them.
dude, we're so fucking evil. It's insane when it
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
to nukes.
and it's this amazing. I've been paying attention, like, just to the what the Democratic presidential candidate's position on this issue is. This is, by the way, an issue that if we lived in a civilized, functioning society, this would be an issue that Americans would care about. It would come up in debates, like every once in a while. Even the pundits on TV would talk about it. But of course, we live in an incredibly stupid, evil society, so no one knows what the first strike capability is or what the position of the politicians are. The Democratic presidential candidates historically have supported renouncing first strike capabilities or whatever the phrasing for that is, but they never, whenever they're in power, it's like everything else. They never actually do anything. Like it's on paper, it's on the in their own individual platforms, and then they never actually push for it once they're in power.
But yeah, this
Just
movie is
why did-
doing one of our
Right.
many projections, of what we do. We're like, that would be horrible if they did it.
And this is like the bare minimum
Mhm.
ask from the whole part of the world, which is the overwhelming majority of the world that thinks, hey, maybe we should start reining in this whole nuke thing. Maybe it's kind of scary. This is like the this is like the
Mhm.
easiest, like if the US were to do this, China and Russia, like everyone knows that China and Russia would go on board because they don't want nuclear holocaust either. And also like the nuclear arms race is like stupid. Everyone knows it's stupid. It's just like there's a lot. This capital could be used in so many better ways. This is like the bare minimum first step toward something that basically everyone wants. And
Yeah, can we talk about the genre of the Cold War movie for a second? Because I think it is interesting that they have to find all of these like settings around the fringes because there is no war. There's no like Saving Private Ryan for the Cold War unless maybe like a Vietnam movie or something. But like for example, like Top Gun I think came out before this and I have heard or I think I read that like the Navy wanted to give their equipment to a film production to like do for the Navy what Top Gun did for the Air Force. And so they provided sets for this movie, and it shows. They look great. I mean, I don't have any complaints about the way these military vehicles look in a film.
Well, that was the only reason
It's more their usage in real life.
the reason this movie got greenlit in the first place was because the Navy was supportive of it on the Top Gun theory of marketing or whatever. But like we wouldn't like a bunch of studios passed on it prior to the Navy getting on board because to back to, high school Jackson, they thought the plot was too convoluted. They couldn't follow the story. I think getting like bogged down in the world making of the submarine, like it hits people differently. Like you were vibing with it, other people don't or whatever. But basically, this movie was struggling to be born until the Navy was like, you know what, this could help us, rape and pillage the poor inner city and make them join the Navy. So
by the way, the whole idea that by the 1980s it would be Russia that would be ahead on this particular technology is just totally like historically illiterate. I mean, by the 80s, the Soviets were way behind. They were way behind on everything. Their entire economy was collapsing. Their entire society was already collapsing.
This is a movie that is basically a political ad for Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, right? Where like that was part of the strategy is like we're going to pour money into R&D for shit that's never going to exist just because the Soviets will have to do it to keep up and they can't. And so this movie posits a world where they are so far ahead. The implicit understated message is that we need a Caterpillar drive, right? Like to quote Dr. Strangelove, we need to close the Caterpillar drive gap. Okay.
This is what we're living through with China right now, by the way.
It's
the same.
And they fucking did this with Putin's Russia. It's more absurd than like 1980s Russia. Like I remember I actually was a signals intelligence officer and I got trained at NSA and I was like in on like secret briefs or whatever, like at least the preliminary ones that everyone gets when they go there. And like, it was clear again, like we were way ahead of Russia on all like the cyber war stuff. Right. But then both parties, like once Trump comes to power in 2016, like both parties for different reasons end up like this insane threat inflation of like Putin and cyber war and like we need to catch up with Putin and cyber war and it's like even more absurd than what they do in this movie, and what they do in this movie is really absurd.
I'm so interested in the position of the analyst. It seems fun. It seems like you research topics and then you present it to your superiors.
It's pretty fucking boring. But
I mean, I wasn't actually I had
it.
analysts under me when I was a signals intelligence officer. I was like a manager.
I was like rank and file, and he would have been my boss when we were in the military.
Yeah. I mean, I had to put together like targeting packages and stuff. So I was doing like a certain level of analytical work, but it was also my guys who spoke the language and they would do like hardcore analysis. Yeah. There were definitely moments where like, I will say the one thing that this movie did leave in my head, my young and dumb head in the early 20s when I was a Marine officer, is this idea that like being an analyst can be really cool and heroic, and you could be like the Galileo like figure that sees the world for what it really is at a key moment. So there were times where like I think I was inspired by that kind of thing. Of course, like there was no justification for me thinking that way, but still, and that was kind of like what I think I'm curious about you, Van, if you ever felt.
It was the same, dude.
Yeah.
Ben Affleck's Jack Ryan. I mean, the timing of when I saw Some of All Fears played into everything because it was like right when I was new in the military. But like, I was trying to be that guy, like it was. This is the the person that you're trying to emulate and like live up to in a way, and they are portrayed as sexy and heroic and everything great and good, and so it's like naturally you want to be that, and the idea that you can be that without being a special forces assassin, like that you can do it from a professional class vantage point was like all the more appealing. Go home to your wife and kid at the end of, like that. It was like a whole package deal. Jack Ryan is American white Christian nationalist James Bond. It's like took a while for me to like have that bloom fall off the rose or whatever. But
And hey, I much prefer the propaganda for the analyst than the propaganda for the torturer that we saw in Zero Dark 30, Like,
Yeah.
bang bang.
Well, and then and I think like I watched the first season of the most recent Jack Ryan like Netflix show, I guess. And like
mhm,
he really is like a special forces guy. He's like James Bond. And that's like basically what all spy thrillers have become now. And like just like
mhm.
so much of like if it's not like real superheroes, it's like metaphorical superheroes, like in a spy war context. Like everyone is just a super ninja. The other thing that I've been noticing while doing this show is dudes are so much bigger now. Like they're all so roided up. So like the
Dude,
guy who plays
everybody's on
Jack Ryan,
testosterone now.
yeah,
It's
the
fucking
guy who plays Jack Ryan, I forget who he is, but he's like big. He's like roided up. Everyone's just like these roided up special forces guys. So
Mhm,
yes, I would prefer the analytic, romance. To the,
mhm.
I read a book
Uh,
by an
yeah.
analyst to do our Iraq War series. This guy John Nixon, who debriefed Saddam, and then had two experiences with the president, where he'd have to, type up, like, get his reports together. It would take him like weeks, and then twice he had to brief George Bush, and both times it was an extremely negative experience.
dude, this is part of like what so after I was in the military, which basically I was this basement dweller, like I never saw the light of day, very anonymous. But when I served in the Obama administration, I was a civilian official, and I worked in the office of the Secretary of Defense. I worked for 5 different secretaries of defense during that period. I was one of 1,000 people on his staff at any given time, but I was in the room with him, talking to him like frequently. I would travel on the secretary's plane. Like you'd have to do this dance of like, on the one hand, providing real advice and talking points and like position papers and shit, tabling your theory of something. And at the same time, you're the fucking nug who has to carry the reams of printer paper and like, like Gary the Bagman from Veep. Like that's literally what you are. But also he will ask you for substantive advice, and that's also your role. And you
wow.
live in that duality. But the thing that was very alienating for me about being in that position was that it was like realizing that the emperor has no clothes. When you're active duty military and you're like super far down the chain of command, you just assume that like the people up on high got there because they earned it. It's meritocratic. They're clearly smart guys or whatever. They're above you. They get it. They see the whole picture. And then you get in the room with like secretary after secretary, and these are incredibly powerful people. They kind of don't know shit, and they rely heavily on the good faith that the staffers who happen to be around them are providing them with like the best possible information. But like it's just kind of like this whole system is fucked. Like if this is what power looks like, then we're fucked. And like that,
That
I have
sucks.
a
Yeah.
simple reaction to all. Yeah.
I certainly hope people don't feel this way about Pete Hegseth, because
Yeah. But I mean,
that would
Pete,
make me
Pete, He-
sadder.
Pete Pete Hegseth is like a particularly cartoonish version of what you have every time, which is secretaries. They serve their president. They do
Mhm.
not serve the institution in which they are appointed. They will pretend to do that, and they might convince themselves this is what they do. But particularly when it comes to the intelligence bureaucracy, this happens time and again, where the secretaries of all or the heads of these agencies, they all basically do the bidding of whatever the president at any given moment wants them to do. And there are once in a while there'll be some tension behind the scenes between some of these people. But the fundamental tension is not between the heads of these agencies, the heads of these departments, the heads of these branches, these secretaries, and the president. It's between these appointed figures and the rest of the bureaucracy, because they have two separate missions. I mean, the mission of like your career bureaucrat in any of these agencies is to do good work. I don't want to like make them all seem like they're good people and they do great stuff. It's much more complicated than that. But they are like they tend to value what they're putting out, the products that they're putting out, more than the secretary, than the people at the top, because like this is their whole life, this is their livelihood, and they take pride in it. Whereas like the guys at the top that are like coming in every few years, they're fucking henchmen.
Yeah.
This was the thing I thought about, like when Bernie almost won in 2020. A lot of leftists have become critical of the fact that we tried to do an end run around building a mass movement and we tried to just go straight and capture the presidency because that's how power is structured in America. The thing about that had value as a wager is that, like, if Bernie had captured the presidency, the old civil service as it existed pre-MAGA, now it's all fucking, loyalty oaths and weird shit. But like before, they were so focused on like, process is my North Star and that kind of shit, that like you could have given them new principles or new missions or new North Stars politically, ideologically. And as long as it didn't like violate the Constitution, they would have been your technocratic foot soldiers. So like they're actually like Bernie could have captured the state and the state would have like implemented his orders to a large extent. Like he would have been wielding state power effectively, I think, if he could have won. We just never got there.
Alas.
I wonder who the Bernie Sanders Secretary of Defense would have been. It's a strange pick for sure. Is it just like a
Lawrence
general they
Korb, I
like?
think. Larry Korb is
Yeah.
the most likely. He was like a former general or maybe a former colonel, but he's a big like anti-war restrainer, foreign policy type guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second choice, Tulsi Gabbard. She's been in both parties. She's been on every side of every issue.
She's a very open-minded thinker, to explore all possibilities, and it's done done her well. So maybe we should do that.
I hope you're kidding.
Yeah.
I hope I'm
should-
kidding too.
Yeah.
For the sake of my soul.
Linking this to the movie, though, it is kind of interesting that, like, you talk about these foot soldiers who are all these appointees. Basically, the only reason this plot works from the American political perspective in the film is that the national security advisor is this slimy Southern Bill Clinton style politician who outright says, like, when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their lollipops.
That is the best line.
And
His name is Jeffrey Pelt, like in the movie. That's the character's name, which I just think is a funny name.
But he's like, yeah, I'm going to tell the Joint Chiefs of Staff to like send out the whole fleet, watch the Soviets. Eventually, he tells them to sink the Red October. But I have this little thing on the side. I got this little project on the side. Yeah, I'll send Jack Ryan. I'll give him 3 days because, hey, maybe it'll be a big win. But he's only thinking about political advantage when he is sending out orders when it comes to national security.
That is also not, I mean, Kissinger maybe is an exception, but like usually the national security advisor is just like the preeminent wonk. Like they like view themselves as apolitical, which is funny because I think in like a right winger's imagination, especially of like a lib administration or something, they would think like the national security advisor is like Rahm Emanuel or something. The way this movie started, and they had like the prologue, the typey, I forget even what it said exactly, but it was just setting up the whole story as it's a fact that the Soviets lost a nuclear armed sub. The US and Soviets collaborated to try and find it or something. And then everything. And then it said something like, both governments insist that what you're about to see did not happen or something like that, which I thought was like so clever and like such a good, like I was in at that moment. Not in high school apparently, but when I saw it this
Yeah. One thing I love from the propaganda angle of this film is like Giordano mentioned projection, right? We're projecting what we do onto the Soviets. Why do the Soviet officers want to defect to America? What do they say? Sam Neill says, "I want a round American wife."
Yes,
He says
in Montana.
in Montana, he wants a pickup truck and a recreational vehicle. And the thing that he's fixated on is like he wants to travel like from state to state with no borders and internal checkpoints. And I'm like, well, 2025, we tried.
I know.
Like,
Sorry, Sam Neill.
yeah.
By the way, he's another great character actor and does a great job.
Most famous Kiwi.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, he's like the biggest star that New Zealand's ever produced.
Oh dang! I thought he was Australian. I'm sure that's highly offensive.
That is super offensive.
The way they portray the Russians here is really interesting. On the one hand, in the beginning, there's this interesting cut between the American submarine, where you have these jokesters. You have another really interesting character, Petty Officer Ronald Jonesy Jones, played
Yes.
by Courtney Vance, and he's another kind. He's kind of like a Jack Ryan Jr. I mean, he's
Mhm.
like he also is figuring out all this shit, like just
He also hasn't slept in forever.
yeah.
Just
So, but
He's an
anyway,
audiophile. He's a guy who only listens to vinyl and FLAC files, but he's
Yeah.
on a boat now.
Another great actor, by the way, Shakespearean actor. I looked him up. I saw him in a lot of movies or other things during that era, and I totally forgot about it. But he's awesome. But
Mhm.
yeah, so he's going back and forth with his bros, and they're all like doing banter and like just, like just like riling each other up. And then it cuts to the Russian submarine, to the Red October, and they're all like marching in unison, like doing a drill or something.
And
So like the rank and file on the Russian side and the rank and file on the American side, like one is like American freedom, freewheeling freedom, and the other is like Russian discipline, Russian hierarchy.
the Russian
but
ships
the
like the HMS Pinafore, they're breaking out in song,
yeah,
yeah.
they and when do they break out in the song? Is when Ramius gets on the radio, they tells them their mission, and they find out they're going to Cuba, where the weather is warm, and so is the comradeship. And one of the guys on the mess stands up and does the hourglass silhouette shape with his hands, and they are so horny in that moment that they start singing the Soviet national anthem.
That's a great combination. Horniness and Soviet national anthem. There was no women in this movie. Did you notice that?
No.
Like
Dudes rock.
Yeah.
it's the
I think you
ultimate.
see
Yeah.
Jack Ryan's
Oh,
wife
wait.
and nanny very
Yes.
briefly at the beginning of the film.
And child, yeah.
I don't even remember seeing his wife. I remember seeing the nanny.
Oh yeah, maybe the wife is off camera and you just hear her voice. But
Yeah.
Well, there was no curse words in this movie, which is kind of strange. No women. And there was like very little violence. I guess from one point of view, it's like, why would a high schooler want to watch this? It's like-
the only violence was the social death caused by secondhand smoking on a submarine. Because we see everyone is blasting things.
Jonesy, I just want to mention too before we move on that he hears them singing with the equipment and is
Yeah.
able to sort of he has a hunch himself. You want to talk about how he's Jack Ryan. He has a hunch that it's out there, and he's able to do the brilliant move. See, this submarine, it costs $1 billion. It's completely undetectable. It's sort of like Death Star weak spot is that if you speed up any recording by 10, it absolutely is detectable.
And Jonesy didn't trust the computer. And that's what the captain says to him. He's like, "Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
the computer told me it was just a seismic activity." But then for some reason I sped
love
it up
the
10
idea
times.
of them like using like a 1985 computer sound wave classifier like function at that era to like we even in this day and age, you'd want to give it that like a human reading, but I can't imagine what type of computer magic that he thought he was doing.
Yeah, I was totally into this whole acoustic intelligence thing where it's like that was an aspect of the submarine world that
True.
really was like, oh, like you could nerd out about that. And like I remember in GI Jane, which we should probably also do at some point, before she went into Navy SEAL training, she was an intel analyst, and it was like she was like a topography analyst or some shit. Like she would analyze like the bumpiness of a terrain or something. It's like, oh, there's a mountain there, so you got to go around, shit like that. And like I remember in high school, I saw that and I was like, oh, I'm never gonna learn a foreign language, but maybe I could do that. And so it's like I was like, maybe I could be a topography analyst or an acoustic analyst. Like it's these categories of thing where it's like, oh, I don't need to learn Chinese. So that's a good thing.
Their signals are that's what was so fascinating when I went on that tour of like the submarine and the aircraft carrier off Manhattan. Like they have extremely sophisticated signals for like what technology is available to them. Like they're doing the best they can with like 1950s era electronics. It's insane to think about like submarines existing and like the level of sophistication they have on board, and the maneuvering that they have to do in these situations I think is like very novel to, I mean, like submarine warfare. The way that he avoids torpedoes is spoken about at length. I think he does as the headmaster of Vilnius, he knows exactly what his opponents are trained to do and is able to sort
Mhm.
of outmaneuver them as a result.
Can I just say like another just ridiculous thing about the plot and why it's so convoluted and why probably the studios were reluctant to buy it is the it also hinges on Ramius. Part of his plan is destroying his own boat enough to a degree that like he like deliberately is like messing up the submarine so that his own troops will want to leave it. So throughout, he's like making these decisions that seem totally insane to everyone else. And you find out toward the end why this is. Like he's just basically trying to like cause problems for the submarine to a degree. Like, and it's like a staged process. There's like one emergency after another. Basically, like that's ridiculous because that's incredibly dangerous. Like, why would that be part of your plan? And then on top of that, Jack Ryan figures this out. Like Jack
Yep.
Ryan is just like in the shower. He's literally in the shower. He's like, he has a eureka moment. Wait, how's he gonna do this? How he's gonna do? Oh, he's gonna do something to get them off the boat.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's even dumber than that because he's already come to the conclusion that a man like Ramius would never sacrifice all of his men. So he needs to get them to get off. And as he's shaving, he says, like, how would you get guys to leave a nuclear submarine? That's it. Nuclear. The reactor.
Yeah.
Nuclear.
Yeah.
They're powered by a nuclear reactor.
This is underpants gnome logic. This is like jumping from point A to point C, and it was like, how did you get there?
Do they kind of conflate the distinction between a nuclear driven submarine and a nuclear armed submarine? Because that is a distinction.
Right.
Like,
And the Red October
they-
is both because there's a sign.
Yeah.
There's points when
Yeah.
he goes down and says like, "What can you get me from the reactor?"
yeah,
And it also
yeah,
has nuclear weapons. Yeah.
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I mean the bit that made me kind of scratch my head, and I'm not up on the boat lore. I'm not up on Atlantic topography, but there's this hydrography, whatever the hell. There's a scene where they're going through an underwater canyon, and it's very high tension because like the charts have been plotted exactly. You need to make the turns at exactly the right times. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, this canyon is at the bottom of the ocean. Just go up. Like, you don't need to go through the canyon. You got a whole ocean there. Why not just go up?
yeah. The hundredth dimensional chess that's involved in the plotting is so insane because like it's not only that like Ramius is planning to basically like not torpedo his own submarine, but just like gradually destroy his own submarine as part of his plan. And not only is Jack Ryan able to figure this out, but also Ramius's plan also involves a young buckaroo figuring out his plan and then making contact with him at some point to make
Mhm.
sure like it also hinges on this. So it's like three like incredibly impossible things all happening one after another.
Well, like he told his officers, I give us a 1 in 3 chance of pulling
It's
this
more like
off.
1 in 3 million, but
Yeah, yeah.
It's bananas. Yeah. Like this outcome was a 1 in a million. Funny enough, there was in 1986, there was a Soviet sub that sank, a nuclear armed sub. Like it had nuclear warheads on it and it sank off the coast of Bermuda or something. Like it was like near, it was either in or near our EEZ. It just happened to be at a moment in history where the Soviets and the Reagan administration were like in a détente mode. So the Soviets basically just, casually called us up and like, hey, we have a fucking problem. Can you help us out? It was very straightforward. But like,
Mhm.
you can imagine if we were in, fucking warmonger mode, that the Soviets would be like trying to like hide their weakness and mask it as straight. It would have ended up being more like this movie, I feel like. And this movie had one version of it that could have worked out well, but most of the versions would have gone to shit,
Yeah, most of the versions of this film, or like most outcomes of this film, is the Red October gets fucking sunk either by the Russians or the Americans.
That's the wise bet, yeah.
it's still so much fun to watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like despite all everything we're saying right now, like if anyone listening to this hasn't seen the movie, I definitely like it's a good ride.
Yeah, it has that Star Trek quality of being like two absolute masters going at it from the deck of a ship, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I
It's
think
a
people
cat and
like that.
mouse game.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife, who is just not into any of the stuff that we watch on this show, and she was totally into Hunt for Red October, like bizarrely, disturbingly,
Way
like
more than you, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah. It was such a role reversal. It was weird. But yeah, like I mean, craft wise, it was definitely like maybe I was more sour at the beginning of this episode than I should have been. Yeah, this was a great movie. What am I saying? Yeah.
And like
Can we you say something about-
for a Cold War movie, this is something Giordano said a while back, but like it is hard to make an engaging Cold War movie because it's just a standoff, especially in the world of the Navy. It's just boats watching each other forever. It's not the
Mhm.
most engaging thing cinematically. And what's fascinating is that Ramius even says this with a line where he says, like, oh, I was a bad husband. I was never there. I wasn't there for my wife's death. I was always at war, but it was a war with no battles, no casualties, and no monuments. And
No, he
I
says,
heard
but
that.
it had casualties. He says
Oh,
no
right, but
monuments, no
casualties.
battles, but casualties. Yeah.
Mm.
Yes, and I just saw that line. I was like, so wait, if it was a shooting war, you wouldn't be defecting. Like, if you had a cause for which to fight, like, your issue was the lack of battles and monuments. But
But that's also like so much of the critique of the Russians or the portrayal of the Russians in this movie can like even if you can make the case that like okay, America, the United States was still relatively free, you could go from state to state without like a checkpoint, and I think that's true. Like Russians were defecting at Americans weren't really defecting during this era, and there's reasons for this, right?
mhm.
So that's true. But
Except for a
if you
little
look
guy
at
named Lee Harvey Oswald.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, right. But like you look at like us now and like so many of the depictions of the Russians like apply to the moment we're now in the United States. In a way, like the Russians had the final laugh in this movie, right? I mean, even like the final scene, like the theme of revolution throughout. So basically, like Jack Ryan is on to like he knows that there's a reason for the date. There's a reason for the name of the submarine. Red October refers to the October Russian Revolution, when the Bolsheviks take power
Mm.
in 1917, and then it ends with Jack Ryan and Ramius like in Mid Coast Maine, and they talk about revolution. Ramius's character basically paraphrases Thomas Jefferson, like every once in a while there needs to be
Yep.
a revolution, and there he's basically confirming to Jack Ryan, like Jack Ryan's hunch was correct. The date,
Mhm.
the anniversary. It was his wife's death, but it also was October. It was October Revolution. The name of the submarine. All of this is coming together basically for Raimi. it's a statement on Ramius's part that Russia needs another revolution. And this is right at a time when Russia is actually 1990. Russia is amidst a new revolution, the very revolution that both Ramius and Jack Ryan wanted.
The movie had been planned, I feel like, in the 80s. It's written in the 80s, and yet comes out the same year that, like, within the plot of this movie, the Red October is handed to us, to like study and break down and, turn into our own in a way.
Yes.
Little did Ramius know the Soviet Union's drunkest soldier was getting ready for the next Russian Revolution in the form of Boris Yeltsin.
Yeah. Collapse.
This was the revolution they would get.
Yeah, how about the fucking like medical officer being named Putin too? Like there's so many nice details.
Yeah.
So well for this.
Yes. Oh, the good point. I had that in my notes and I forgot to mention it. Yeah.
Like, I think the best Cold War movie ever that I can think of is probably like Doctor Strangelove, but I think that this fits very nicely into like the last year of the Cold War. I'm glad that we got like a great Cold War movie out of this year.
Well, it feels like a nostalgia play, and I don't know how much that was on purpose versus just the coincidence of timing, but it was, how like American Graffiti was trying to tap into a kind of boomer nostalgia for like a car culture and an innocence that had just happened. And so like it was nostalgia not for some like long ago time, but something that was like 10 years ago, and that's what this is, but even more compressed in a way. Like it ends up being that like this is this cultural artifact that looks longingly at the most almost idealized version of the Cold War only a few years, and like they have to like backdate it to like 1984 to say that's when this was actually happening, because literally like the Communist Party was being removed as it was being filmed or whatever in the Soviet Union. And so like anybody, like basically the whole national security state, liberals basically, they all are looking at the end of the Cold War as this movie's coming out. They didn't anticipate the end of the Cold War. They thought this shit was going to keep on going, but also like they had built their whole lives in existence around this grand enemy. And in a funny way, the movie is kind of like very sympathetically portraying the Soviets. Like, these guys are just like us. And then ironically, they really mean that in the literal sense. Like they want to be just like us with our fat wives and our pickup trucks. And
Well, that's the Cold War, but that's especially the post-Cold War unipolar moment conceit. Is that now everyone can be Americans just like us. We can easily export American freedom to every part of the world. This is what everyone wants. And of course, it gets proven wrong time and again, particularly across, throughout the War on Terror. The line that Ramius at the maybe it's Jack. So he basically Ramius like paraphrases the Thomas Jefferson quote, and then I think after that he then quotes Christopher Columbus, which is insane.
Yes.
He said, and the sea will grant each man new hope as sleep brings dreams of home. And then Jack Ryan says, "Welcome to the new world, sir." And then they ride off into it's like the end of Casablanca. It's like a beautiful the beginnings of a beautiful friendship or whatever. What's amazing about this is that the first thing I thought of with that Columbus quote was actually the fact that like who knew that only 10 to 15 years later Russians would be looking at nostalgia, looking back at the Soviet era as like better than what came after. And in fact, they've done consistent polling, not only in Russia, but across the former Soviet republics, with few exceptions. Ukraine, obviously, is a prominent exception. Most of the former Soviet republics now, a majority of the people in these countries yearn for the days of the Soviets. Now, I'm not saying that the Soviet republics were better than what they have now, but that nostalgia is there for a reason, that things are really fucked up now. And you do have a lot of people that are, as sleep brings dreams of home. Also, we get that in the United States now. Like we got to really enjoy our new world after the end of the Cold War. And now like, we just want to go home. Like,
Mhm.
whatever hellstorm we now find ourselves in. Can we just rewind the tape, please?
What the West did to the Soviet Union after it fell, that was kind of like what Columbus did. There's some parallels there.
Yeah.
We needed a Marshall Plan for the Soviet Union so bad, and instead we got NATO expansion, you know?
And we got a reverse Marshall Plan. We took money out.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
put money
Yeah.
in.
yeah.
Yeah, some very unscrupulous Americans went to Russia and like collected shares from people in
Mhm.
Well,
their newly privatized industries.
the money went to two people. It went to, Western U.S. led capitalists, and then it went to the new oligarchy class
Mhm.
in Russia
Mhm.
across Russia's periphery.
Normalize calling our rich people oligarchs. That's my take for everyone.
What's that?
know?
Yeah, no, totally. Yes, yes. No, I agree with you there. Absolutely.
It's funny that his character, like his fantasy of living in America, is just to like hunt rabbits and have like a round wife, because it's such a rustic way of life that it seems like one available in almost any country.
I know.
Basically any country.
His
Yeah,
fantasy
Vegas
doesn't
wants to go
involve New
fishing.
York City. Like,
No, he doesn't want to like come to go. I will go to Disneyland. It's not a cultural victory for him.
The fall
yeah,
of the Soviet Union was also very bad for Tom Clancy's writing career. Like I said at the top of the show, I read way more of these books than I'm proud to admit, but here are just some of the plots of some of the later books. We're in like the mid 90s here. He does a full boomer nostalgia one called Without Remorse, which is about a guy a SEAL coming back from Vietnam and killing drug dealers in the hood. I think it gets pretty racist if I recall correctly. There's one called Debt of Honor, in which America and Japan go to war over tariffs, if I recall correctly. There's like a
They're
Yeah,
dumping their steel on us.
it was the very brief Japan scare. The fear, was that Japan would be the great, the next America, and we need to stop Japan.
Yep. That's right.
The Soprano family always needs someone to villainize, and the America we always have someone who's like oh my god, they want to be like they're our enemy. We need to like outcompete them, and
Yeah,
it applied to things like Japan and West Germany is so quaint from this
Yep.
era.
That book ends with a Japanese kamikaze pilot, I'm not joking, hitting the State of the Union and decapitating the entire government. And Jack Ryan was the
God,
designated
have that
survivor.
Can we have that guy, please?
Um,
That would be a great ending. Sorry, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah.
Executive
No, I-
Orders is the anti-Iran one. That's one where Iran takes over Iraq, and we got to stop them. Jack Ryan is president in that one. And I'll just close this out with one that came out in 2000, The Bear and the Dragon, in which China invades Russia and Russia asks to join NATO is the plot line. I don't think the Russians would join
Jesus.
NATO in 2000.
That's all
Wow.
because it's the opposite of what happened in the 70s. You had this, Russian split, and Nixon going to China was basically like the U.S. allying with the Chinese to best the Soviets.
This nostalgia that you're talking about, like I think for both the Soviets and Americans, there's this nostalgia for this world that at least made sense to them, even if there was the high tension of nuclear holocaust. It's like we have our two superpowers and we're playing chess on the ocean with one another, and the world afterwards gets a lot more messy and complicated. And the Tom Clancy books get a lot more unhinged.
This is crazy. I've been friends with Ben for basically like 30 years, and we do a podcast together. We made like 100 episodes. I never knew that you had read a bunch of Tom Clancy books. I can't believe he becomes president. This is the stupidest detail I've ever heard. That's like if Robert Langdon from the Da Vinci Code became Secretary of State or something. Like it totally changes the nature of the fiction for him not to be an analyst but be the president.
I think Van and I are like our sick form of like therapist or something, and I think people come on here and they just like spill the beans on everything. We learn the deepest things about ourselves. And so, what do you guys think? Because you mentioned Bear. I know we're out of time. But you mentioned like one of his books was called like Bear and Dragon or whatever. The term bear for the Russians shows up very early in this movie, where actually we haven't talked about James Earl Jones yet. He plays
Oh yeah.
deputy director of the CIA. He's Vice Admiral James Greer. And in an early meeting, he's kind of like calling in Jack Ryan to like be like the lead analyst on this case, this emerging case. And before he gets into business, Jack Ryan tells this bizarre story about his daughter and how she gets upset because like he takes away something from her, and he names the name of this thing.
The
And
bear,
then James
Stanley.
Earl Jones is like, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, it was the bear. Stanley is a bear. ... And then they go right into the actual thriller
That
part
went
of the
over my
movie.
head in terms of like bear
Yeah,
as metonymy
yeah,
for the Russian.
yeah. Again, this very like chessboard view of the world, like almost like childish view of the world, where like these great powers are in fact no different than like children like tugging at a toy or something.
Mm.
And that is like exactly how the whole field, the discipline of like IR analogizes state behavior, like to our detriment. We actually understand less because of this, but it's like we assume like Thomas Schelling won a fucking Nobel Prize for this shit. Like you think about nuclear war and coercive diplomacy as analogies to a parent disciplining a child or a game of chicken or like these individualized rational actor type, but it is what people get trained to, or for a long time they got trained to think like, you know.
And the film ends when Jack Ryan brings a Soviet sub back to America. The final scene is him on a plane next to a bear, the new bear that he's got for his daughter.
Oh, right. Holy shit. I didn't make that connection. So, wow, teamwork here.
Fun
Yeah.
fact, the bear at the end is the same bear from Die Hard.
Hell yeah.
What? Like they used the exact same bear, yeah, because John McTiernan or whatever his name was involved in both.
Nice.
Interesting. Greer, James Earl Jones's Greer, that's consistent in the Jack Ryan movies, isn't it?
He's in the Harrison Ford one,
I see.
but not in the Ben Affleck one. Although they did get Morgan Freeman, so like, you know,
Right.
dignified black man.
Notable voice with a famous voice.
Well, that was also that Tom Clancy was also writing at the time where like you start seeing like elevated black officials both within the military industrial complex and also you know, at the highest levels of the civilian government. Colin Powell, obviously. But then you get, you know, Condoleezza Rice all the way up to the president. Well, actually, Trump is doing away with all that. But,
Yeah.
what was Biden's secretary?
Lloyd Austin, Secretary of
Lloyd
Defense.
Austin.
One last buzzer beater dunk on this movie before we wrap up. In basically the opening scene of this film, Jack Ryan mansplains turbulence to a flight attendant. He's like, as if a flight attendant would not know what turbulence is, and he gets down to the scientific, granular detail.
I was trying to give the writers some credit, and I was like, wait, like was turbulence not like a common concept in them? And I'm like, no, that's not right. They're just like, yeah.
I would have loved to see them like play their emotions a little bit more honestly in that scene, because the stewardess is being annoying, right? She's like, you should go to sleep. And he's like, I can't sleep on planes. She's like, really, go to sleep. And he's
I've
like,
never seen that happen before. Like a stewardess come over and tell you to go to sleep.
Go to sleep. Well, man, flying in the 90s sure was different. And the way that he then has to like explain how turbulence works to explain why his like fear is actually rational. If you look, I think that's just to characterize him, because he is going to fly a lot in this movie, so they got to give him something, you know, to kind of.
Well, it's also be that he's the smart guy that knows things like what turbulence is. If you watch this scene in isolation, it almost looks like the beginning of like a porn scene. You're like negging each other. She's like, "You really need to go to sleep," and he's like, "Yo, what about turbulence?" And she's like,
No, that was the Hunt for the Red.
I heard about turbulence. And then she's like, "You really need to go to sleep."
Oh my god, this was trust the experts porn, is what this was. Ultimately, yeah. All right, well,
I guess for my closing thoughts are that we love, if somebody asked me like I'm really into submarines. I want to see the best movie set on a submarine. You know, I love that it has a hyper specific plot, that it makes it unlike other movies in like a very true way. You know, there are a lot of movies that are trying to do the same thing, but I think it chooses a very unique setting that makes it like inherently interesting. You know, Ben and I did an episode of Master and Commander, right, on our show, or what was it? Yeah. And that was very similar in the way that like I got to enjoy it because it brought me into like this very specific world that every guy eventually grows to an age where they get interested in sort of military history and specifically naval military history and lore.
I don't know what that's about, honestly, but yeah.
I love submarine movies, and this is one of the better ones. I mean, Das Boot, if you can do subtitles, is great. It's also like an explicitly anti-war movie. It's also real fucking long. There's one.
You know, my dad's going. Sorry, I have to do this. My dad has a joke where he says he didn't like Das Boot because he thought it would be a movie about computers. But anyway, we can talk Das Boot.
God damn.
Womp,
Yeah, most submarine movies are not very good. There's one called U-571 that's thoroughly mid. There's one that's made by National Geographic called K-19, The Widowmaker. It's also thoroughly mid. And then there's
Crimson Tide.
That's what I was getting to.
Crimson Tide.
Crimson Tide is sick because you got Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington doing mutinies and counter mutinies over whether or not to fire the nuke.
Yes.
Maybe I'll just also wrap up. I forgot that I wanted to mention that it's interesting. You know, Ben and I just did this episode on the history of the Soviet Union. And one of the things that always hamstrung it, especially in the 80s, like Ben said, because we were spending so much, is that they had to sink so much money into their program, right? And it's interesting that this movie is also about like $1 billion asset that they've spent so much of their state capacity and resources on is then being scuttled. Like it's truly the best. So it's like it's a great win for America movie in that sense too.
Yeah, not for nothing. I meant to mention this earlier, but the whole like at the beginning of the movie, there's the guy who's talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he's like, you know, that was just a few dozen warheads, and now one submarine can pull off our coast, and we don't even know about it. And it'll have hundreds of warheads. The reason why that's technically true in the movie, like in orders of magnitude more warheads than in the Cuban Missile Crisis, is because of the MERV technology, multiple independent reentry vehicles, where you could get they call it a bus, but you stick a bunch of warheads on a bus and then you put that on the missile. And so what you end up having is the ability with one missile to deliver many warheads. We caused that. That's our fault. We developed the first MERV, and then the Soviets had to like catch up to us. Right. So like the reason why the 80s was so much more combustible with the subs and the MERVs was because of what we fucking did a decade earlier, which is when
we got a dick and larger. We got a dick and larger, and then they need to get a bigger dick and larger. That's basically what happened.
Yeah, that's what I like about movies made back then. The dicks were so much smaller, you know.
No, the two sub movies I remember as a kid, Das Boot. I guess I pronounced it wrong earlier, but I watched that as an adult, but not as a kid. As a kid, it was Red October and Crimson Tide. Long way of saying we're gonna have you come on not only for The Rock, which I'm very much into. That's another like childhood fave of mine. And not only for Das Boot, but also for Crimson Tide. You guys are gonna have to become regulars. It doesn't need to be like tomorrow, but like
Listen, I don't know if Giordano is gonna watch all the submarine movies, but I will be there.
Giordano's like, I'm with The Rock.
any movie with Gene Hackman is good. I've never seen a bad Gene Hackman movie. All right, so credit as always for the intro and outro goes to Dumpster Fire by the Great Heights Band featuring Raul V.
Bang bang. All right, guys, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Hell yeah, let's go. And if you're interested in more of Ben and I, we like we said, we have a Iraq War series, which Bang Bang came on for, and the elections episodes we really like too. Oh, there's a 9/11 conspiracies theories episode that people like. And like I said, Master and Commander, if you specifically like this movie, I think.
Beautiful. Yes, remember shuffle is the shizzle, to bring up a nostalgia term. Yeah. All right.
My nizzle.
Yeah.
My sub missile.
All right,
All right,
guys. Take care.
All right,
Thank you so much for having us. Have a great one.
Yeah.
Peace.
Thanks.
Bye.